Hi, I'm Mark Bunker, and with me as always is Aaron Smith-Levin. But this is a very special edition of Dining with the SPs because now Aaron is a candidate for the Clearwater City Council. And how's it going?
I expected the campaign to go well. I did not expect it to go this well.
It is amazing the reaction you get when you knock on doors.
It is.
Almost everybody says you're opposed to Scientology. I'm with you.
That's right.
Sign me up.
I said this yesterday at the event that we did. I have knocked on hundreds of doors all across the city, and there is a 100% acceptance rate, a 100% success rate when you actually talk to when I talk to the citizens, the voters, and I say, I'm running for city council. I run an organization that helps people who are escaping from Scientology. I think we need leaders in this city who aren't afraid to take this organization on and are going to do something effective about it. 100% of the time, they say, you've got my vote.
Yeah, that's incredibly important to a lot of voters here in town, and hopefully more than 50% of the voters, because this is going to be a contest between you and somebody who is backed by all the good old boy network, all the folks in power. They're all going behind Lena. And in fact, we tried to shoot a little video. We tried to shoot this video at a nearby restaurant where we had done a Dining with the SPs before. We were in the restaurant. We shot the whole thing. We put it up. We said, hey, this is a great restaurant. Come and eat here. And the manager came out and said, no, you can't be here. I'm on Lena's steering committee. It would look horrible. I said, yeah, but we're not going to talk about Lena or, we're just trying to promote the restaurant. We thought we'd have a meal here and talk about Clear Sky. But
he threatened to call the police. And so now we're at Downtown Pizza.
Yeah. And, it's a great place to come.
It is.
We end up here quite a bit, even when we're not filming.
Downtown Pizza is easily my top 2 favorite places to go in downtown Clearwater.
Yeah. Great way to get a couple of quick slices, and it's delicious. Anyway.
So what's new in Clearwater, Mark?
We've got a lot of exciting stuff going on. I was elected about a year and a half ago. It was my first term on the council. And one of the most important things that we've been able to accomplish during this time was I had a say in who the new city attorney and the city manager would be. And we chose 2 great people to lead the city into the future. Both of them really top-notch people with great background, great experience, and did a lot of research on Scientology before coming to Clearwater and understand a bit of what Scientology is and how they've behaved over the years. And each of the candidates who came before us, both for our individual personal interviews outside the public view and those we conducted in the council chambers where everyone could watch, I asked each and every candidate, would you be willing to sit down with Mike Rinder and discuss Scientology and how David Miscavige behaves before you sit down with Miscavige? It's good to go in armed with information. And every one of them said yes. And these 2 were the most educated. And now that they're here, our new city attorney, David Margolis, a really spectacular guy. He's come up with some ideas for new tactics. I'm not going to go into any of them now because we have to decide what we want to do moving forward. But it did drop some jaws among the department heads. So I think we're going to shake things up. And then just this past Monday, our new city manager, John Jennings, from Portland, Maine, arrived, and we sat down on Tuesday. And apparently, when John met with David, John said hey, have you considered doing this about Scientology? And David laughed and said, oh, yeah, hey, yeah, that's a great idea. So it's not going to be the same relationship. And back in 2017, when David Miscavige cut off all ties with the city and then went to secretly purchase all these properties downtown and said, I'll wait for the next council. We're here, and this guy might be on it next year. So there's 5 votes on the council, 4 council members and the mayor. To get any action taken on something, you need 3 votes to say yes. So with Aaron, we've got 2 votes, and it just means that we need to convince one other person on the council that this is a step we should take. And I think we can do it, especially with Aaron on the council being a strong, effective communicator and so knowledgeable about Scientology. It's going to be an atmosphere that Scientology hasn't seen since they snuck into town back in '75 when Gabe Casares and Richard Tenney and all of these politicians who faced the most fierce attacks from Scientology understood this isn't right. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what we have in store.
I really do feel like Clearwater is entering a new era when it comes to its ability to deal with the Church of Scientology.
And we need to. We need to be honest and upfront about it. The reason our downtown has been dead is because of the presence of Scientology. Ever since they moved to town, it's been difficult to get people back down here. I saw an old newspaper article from when they were starting to build the flag building, the superpower building. The Scientology spokesperson was saying, oh, this is going to be so great for the city. There's going to be tens of thousands of Scientologists coming here, and they'll be filling the restaurants and filling all the stores. It's going to be bustling. And of course, crickets. None of them come down here. If you're a Scientologist and you come to the Fort Harrison for services, they expect you to stay in the restaurant. They expect you to prepay for all the meals at their restaurants inside the Scientology properties. So it doesn't help the downtown at all and scares people away.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And, I'll tell you, when leaders and politicians say things like, find common ground, find common interests, build bridges, establish communication, that's the kind of things you'd expect diplomats and just polite people to say. But
Sure.
The problem is that when you're talking about the organization Scientology, if you think communication or building bridges or being nice or incentivizing them, if you think that's going to change their behavior, you have no idea what you're talking about or what you're dealing with. And that's the thing, like when Mark talks about if he and I are both in the council, we represent 2 out of 5 votes. I don't expect it would be hard to get a 3rd vote. It's not that the other council members are secretly trying to help Scientology forward their aims. It's
Right.
that they're not informed enough to know what to do. They don't really know what they're dealing with. I mean, that's a fair statement, would you say?
Right.
That's right.
And there's been a 40-plus year history of Scientology like stabbing us in the back constantly.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, the city said, all right, we're going to cut ties with Scientology. And then there was another decade where they said, all right, let's find a way for us to work together. And every time we do that, they stab us in the back. Yeah. So we need to just show that we're not afraid.
No.
The city's not afraid. Developers shouldn't be afraid.
That's right. And
you shouldn't be afraid to come down here and make this the thriving downtown that it deserves to be.
That's right. An anecdote just came to mind. I was knocking on doors this week. And I will do everything in my power to not knock on a Scientologist door, because I'm not trying to create a confrontation. I don't want to make them uncomfortable.
Sure.
But I accidentally knocked on a Scientologist door. And he was very angry. He's like, what's your problem? What's your problem with Scientology? And I said, Scientology has destroyed my family, and you know many families that it's destroyed. And anyway, we had a conversation. It was relatively pleasant for the subject matter. And as he was walking away, I said to him, let me ask you a question. Why are there no Scientologists running for the Clearwater City Council? And he actually stopped and thought about it for a second. And he said, I really don't know. And I said, I'll tell you. It's because there are hardly any Scientologists in Clearwater. That's why. Have a good evening. And I mean, that sort of relates to what you're saying about don't be afraid of them. Look, the Scientology wants you to be afraid of them. I understand that not everybody is willing to take them on the way that we do, right?
Sure.
But if you're afraid of this organization, you should not be in a position of public trust. Because in Clearwater, when people act out of fear, it creates a perception in the minds of everyone who looks at Clearwater. They don't understand that it's fear. It ends up looking like people in Clearwater are in the pocket of Scientology. And you and I know that's not true.
Right.
You and I know that's not true. But city leadership acting out of fear and caution ends up being misinterpreted as sympathy or allegiance to Scientology.
Sure.
And I guess where I'm going with all this is why I believe it's important for council members to proactively work on changing this perception that Scientology pulls the strings in this city or even in the downtown. Is that fair?
It is. And the first step of that, once I got elected, was we changed the way we talk about Scientology on the council. So we talk openly about it. And that in itself is a sea change. I just want to point out that Mayor Hibbard and the other council members that are on the council now, they're not afraid of Scientology. It's just a matter of, when the city tried back in the early 80s, I think it was, to put in a new ordinance that would open up Scientology's books. Any nonprofit would have to reveal their income, and Scientology fought it in court, and they won. And the city wound up paying Scientology's costs. And it cost the city about $1 million. So no one wants to go through that, understandably. But we have to show that we're not just going to sit back and take it anymore. Can I sing? We have to change the conversation. We have to make it possible for business people to say to those of us in City Hall, we're trying to open a brewery, and Pat Harney, the Scientology PR woman, and a couple other Scientologists came in here and pressured us. That's not right.
Yeah.
Scientology should be going about their business, and their business is largely ripping off people with humbug.
Yeah.
But they're allowed to do that, unfortunately. And you can believe anything you want. It's not about beliefs. But they shouldn't be trying to tamper with business downtown.
Yeah.
If they're not going to contribute to the businesses, they shouldn't continue to make the atmosphere even more scary.
Exactly. And yet, even though we can say they shouldn't, you and I know why they do. And,
absolutely.
In some of the campaign interviews and speeches that I've given, I try to separate out, Clearwater's Scientology problem goes many layers deep. And for you and I, we've always cared about and been most focused on the humanitarian problem that Scientology's criminal activities pose. And yet, I'm willing to acknowledge or concede that not all of Clearwater's leaders are going to care about that issue as deeply as you and I do.
Sure.
But if all you care about is dollars and cents and tax revenue and economic issues, then you have to understand why this organization is trying to sabotage the city's efforts to redevelop its downtown commercial core. And you have to be willing to fight back in that battle. I can sit here and say my long-term goal is to get Scientology's tax-exempt status revoked, mainly for the humanitarian reasons. But if you're a Clearwater leader, you have to understand the tax reasons and the economic reasons and the redevelopment reasons that this organization is waging an economic war against the city. The humanitarian issues are actually quite separate. Would you characterize it similarly?
Yeah, absolutely. There's this great financial suck of the economics of Clearwater with Scientology's presence next door. It's the religiously themed black hole that exists here. So we've got to find a way to plug that black hole.
Yeah. And I have to comment, even though I know I mentioned this in so many of my videos. You can edit out my big giant pause here. Every single conversation I've had with a city leader, elected or otherwise, business leader, community leader, when I have explained to them that the reason this organization acts as such a horrible neighbor or member of the community is related to the fact that you cannot join Scientology here at the Flag Land Base. Not one single person has been aware of that fact prior to my explaining it to them. And this is kind of a perfect illustration of how Scientology is almost completely incapable of being honest with the community about its true nature, its true intentions, its true activities. Even people who've lived here their whole lives, whose families have been here for generations, have not understood, you can't join Scientology here? And I've said, no. I said, if this was just a normal Church of Scientology, they would want as many non-Scientologists here in the downtown area as possible, because that's where they would recruit from. But because this is the highest level Scientology organization in the world, Scientologists aren't even allowed to come here without prior authorization. And if they cannot benefit from having non-Scientologists around, they would rather keep them away. Because if they can't benefit from them, then they only pose a risk, they are only a liability. And I'm mentioning this just not just to educate our viewers, but to show how even people with the best of intentions, locals, or leaders, city leaders, are still not properly educated on what they're dealing with, and have been tricked into thinking, if we just treat them better, maybe they'll treat us better.
Yeah.
If we incentivize them, if we reach out, you see what the point that I'm making here is, that it's not that our leadership doesn't want to do what's best for Clearwater. It's that they don't know what they're up against. They don't know what they're dealing with. And if someone like, well, I won't mention any names, but if a Clearwater leader listens to someone like me or someone like you, how do they know we're being correct? How do they know we're being honest? They're taking our word for it. Yeah. And that's why it's so hard to convince people in leadership positions to think differently or behave differently, because they're still like, how do we know what to believe? And you're okay, I get tired of trying to convince people and educate people. And you go, okay, we just need people in those positions who already understand, who are already prepared to do something about it, and I do say, and aren't afraid. As you pointed out, it's not that the others are, but I'm not willing to completely discount the amount of fear that may exist on behalf of some, as far as actual retribution. Do you know? I mean, I'm not saying. I mean,
I understand that. Yeah, absolutely. I saw Bob Minton taken down back in 2001.
Yeah.
They had a global campaign and spent millions to silence him, and ultimately he had to cry uncle.
I think it's fair to say, Mark, that if the mayor of Clearwater, any mayor of Clearwater, were to spearhead an effort to get Scientology's tax-exempt status revoked, there would be some fallout, personally and professionally.
Yeah.
Scientology would go back to its old ways.
Yeah.
Or, at least, they haven't tried to frame a mayor for any crimes in the last 20, 25 years. They might revisit that chapter of their history.
Yeah. I don't think it will go that far, but I'm sure that right now Miscavige is concerned. I'm sure he's not at all happy, A, that I was elected, B, that you're running, C, you may well get elected. And we've got new leadership at the top of City Hall who wants to be more aggressive and change the story.
Yes.
And that's important. Now, we talk about Scientology because this is, our interest, and it's a tiny part of the actual job, because we're dealing with all of the issues that every city faces of affordable housing and streets. What are we going to do with our sports stadium? We've got a big deal coming up with the Phillies. So there's all the day-to-day issues. Oh, here's a big one. We just approved chickens.
Chickens.
He's got chickens
I've got
in his
chickens.
backyard. It's legal to have 4 chickens in Clearwater now. You're welcome. But issues big and small are what we're tackling every day.
Yeah.
Scientology is just something that has been neglected by the city because it's been too tough of an issue to confront. And what we're saying is, we're confronting it. I'm a guy with a camera. He's a guy with a camera. We go online and we say, hey, this isn't right. We're here. We're still here. They put up websites. They smear us. They attack us. Big deal.
Big deal.
The nice thing is, if Scientology says something bad about you, people tend not to believe Scientology, because Scientology lies about practically everything.
It's true. It's true. And I mean, I just so don't care about anything that they say, that it's almost like, even if it is true, I go, you know what? If you really think that just trying to embarrass your critics is going to scare them off, good luck with that.
Right. All those things about you are true.
Oh, we'll talk about that later. But
we got to stop this right now.
But I'm just saying, it even gets down to, like, because a lot of times I focus on the fact that, that they criticize their critics with lies. But the fact is, I hope they use the truth, honestly. I hope they use the truth. Because if they think that's going to be good enough to scare me off or scare you off, they need to learn the lesson that, guys, that ship has sailed. There's nothing you could do or say to change the course of what's going to happen over the next 2, 3, 4, or 5 years, other than make yourselves look worse and worse and worse and worse. And that's why I say, I love when they try to attack me. Just keep showing the world what a horrible organization you really are.
What would be great is if we could have a conversation. So they say something horrible about you, and then, they were sitting here, and we say, well, okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah, exactly.
But they won't do that. They don't want to have a conversation. They want to put out enough smears that you will allegedly see what Scientology says, and I don't want to get near this guy or this woman, and good Lord, why should I believe anything that they say? Well, then that's L. Ron Hubbard's policy of dead agenting.
Yeah.
And that's just one tactic that is insane.
I get emails to the campaign email address just saying, wow, I got your flyer and I looked you up, and wow, those guys must really be afraid of you.
Yeah.
No,
justifiably.
No one's ever sent me an email being like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can support you if these things that are on the internet.
Yeah. Do you like Leah Remini? Well, look at all the horrible things they say about her. Did you believe all that? Of course not.
Yeah.
Because Scientology can't tell the truth about L. Ron Hubbard. They can't tell the truth about the history of Scientology. They can't tell the truth about what's coming on the bridge. They're secretive and nasty. And if you can't start with a baseline of just telling the truth about your founder, for God's sakes, because Hubbard's life was fairly remarkable. I mean, he was an evil genius, but he was not an expert in every field. He was not a person with any smarts that came up with medically sound ways to kick you off drugs. It's quackery. Everything that he puts together, or put together, is based on stuff that he pulled out of his butt.
Yeah.
But you can have that for a small sum of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I was knocking on some doors, and one woman came to the door, got to talking with her about Scientology, the Aftermath Foundation, and it turns out she's a mental health counselor here in town, and said that she recently had a patient come to her who had been kicked out of their family and kicked out of Scientology for substance abuse problems. And I said, well, the irony of that is that Scientology has the quote-unquote best workable technology to handle drug addiction. And yet even with their own members, even with children of their own members, they would expel them from the family and from the group. It just shows the hypocrisy. It just shows the lies. And but it was an amazing opportunity to say, if you see any other patients like that, please contact us at the Aftermath Foundation, and we'll do everything that we can to help them. So these are the conversations that I end up having with voters, even while campaigning for city council. It's really, it's been a remarkable experience so far.
Are there any other stories you want to talk about from the campaign trail? Or?
Well, I kind of forget which ones we just finished that interview. I'm not sure which ones we told. Do you want me to mention the story of knocking on the Scientologist door by accident, or no? Or did I already tell that one earlier?
I think you did tell that one.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'll just tell you, like, when I go to a door, I knock on the door. I was terrified of knocking on doors in the beginning. Now I absolutely love it. I could do it all day long as we have a nice overcast day like this. I knock on the door, I hand them my flyer. I give about a 3-second window for them to figure out if this person's a Scientologist or not based on how they react to my flyer. And if they keep reading that flyer, I go, so listen, I'm running for council. I run an organization that helps people that are leaving Scientology. Instantly, it's really, or wow, or that's incredible. And then I go, we help people that are leaving. We work with law enforcement to document the crimes of this organization. I want to get the tax exempt status removed. And then I start talking about the neighborhoods. I said, look, Scientology happens to be something I'm very knowledgeable about. I was born and raised in it. There's this TV show. But I'll tell you what really got me interested in local politics. And I tell the story about the neighborhoods. I said, did I already tell the story on this video so far today, or was that earlier with the reporters?
No, you didn't tell it here.
And I said, a few years ago, we had a developer want to put a giant storage facility right in our residential neighborhood. And in order for this project to go through, the council and the county commission had to change zoning and land use. And we organized dozens of citizens to go speak against this, say this is not right, please don't do this, we don't want this, and we had a better proposal. And the city's own planning and development staff, the experts in this subject, advised the council, do not approve this, we do not recommend you approve this. Doesn't fit the character of the neighborhood, doesn't fit into the city's overall plan. And the council members were like, God bless your souls, all this citizen engagement, this is what we love to see. Thank you so much for coming out, but we know best, and approved it anyway. Until that time, up until that point, I was not paying attention to local politics. I mean, look, I grew up in Scientology. We didn't care about politics. We were not encouraged to be civically active or anything. But I was at this meeting, and I saw what was happening, and I go, if these elected leaders are not listening to the people who voted for them, and they aren't even listening to the experts that they pay for their advice, who in the world are they listening to? And then you got elected, and I observed a similar thing when it came to conversations about Scientology. Privately, they were, what you're doing is fantastic, this is exactly, we wish you the best. But when it came to actually doing anything, crickets, nothing. And those two things together, right? The issue of it didn't seem like citizens and neighborhoods were being represented, and it didn't seem like anyone was prepared to do anything about Scientology. I said, okay, if this is how business is going to happen in this city, if this is how this council works, then we need new council members. And that is, I tell that exact story to every person I speak to when I knock on doors. 100% of the time, they go, that's amazing, you've got my vote. And so, knocking on doors is the essence of campaigning. That's what I've been told. That's what I'm learning. This is my first time doing it. It has been so rewarding to meet so many different citizens all over the city in this one-on-one way. It's different than doing videos on YouTube. That face-to-face connection is just it's a blast. And I've got 4 more months of this. The election is in 4 months.
Take it from a seasoned politician. I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you very much.
You're getting experience, you're learning as you go along, and you're fighting a good fight.
Thank you very much.
And it helps that you have an opponent who is Scientology's go-to girl.
Yes.
There was a point where I had mentioned at a council meeting, hey, what would be great is Scientology tourism. We should be giving tours of the properties here. And then you and Mike Rinder and a bunch of former members did a big tour. That was a huge success. Brought tons of people down here. We were hoping to eat at one of the local restaurants after the tour, and Scientology went around and sabotaged that at every single restaurant, so we had to go to Safety Harbor, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, to dine there. But the person who actually took my idea and ran with it, he did it in a way that got the city upset and got businesses upset.
True.
And I don't think it was necessary to do that. But it's a learning experience. People make mistakes. What the hell? And I had a reason for starting this story.
You said Lena's Scientology's go-to girl.
Oh yeah. Thanks for reminding me. In the midst of that chaos, I was up in Lena's office. She's on the 11th floor in the building where City Hall is now located.
And she's in that office because she works with the Clearwater Downtown Partnership?
Yeah, but I'm not sure if that's for the partnership or for her personal business.
I understand.
But the reason she invited me up is she wanted to talk about coming before the Downtown Development Board and asking for like $120,000, $130,000 to fund her group. And while we're discussing the validity of that ask, a woman comes running into Lena's office and stops frozen halfway between the door she just opened and us. And Lena goes, "Come back in 10 minutes." And the woman leaves. And I went, who was that? And she said, oh, she's from the Welcome Center. The Scientology Welcome Center? Yeah. Well, what does she want? And she said, well, she was complaining about the Cult City tours.
Yeah.
Why is she complaining to you?
Right.
I'm the council person. I'm sitting right. She could talk to me. Of course, they wouldn't talk to me. Scientologists aren't allowed to talk to me. But
so when Scientology wants to complain about something that's happening in downtown Clearwater, they run to their favorite sympathetic ear,
right,
Lena Teixeira.
And when I announced my run, Scientology's PR woman, Pat Harney, called up Lena and said, "Have you heard about Mr. Bunker? We can't let him run." So, do you want more of the same, or do you want to shake things up a bit?
Let me ask you a question real quick. How do you interpret someone's statement when they go, Aaron says he wants to accomplish all these things, get Scientology's tax stamp status revoked, etc., but I have to be pragmatic. What does that mean?
let's put it on the back burner. Let's not do anything. Yeah. There was another candidate for mayor in the election when I ran, and I bumped into him. We shared campaign consultants, and he would come right after me or right before me, so we bumped into each other. And I said, oh, here's what we need to do about Scientology. We need this, that, and the other thing. And he listened and then took a beat and said, well, Mark, we first have to find ways to work together and do the things that we agree on. And we'll just put that off to the side. No, I said to him. No, we're not putting it off to the side.
Yeah.
We're going to deal with Scientology, and that's what we need from our elected officials. We need people to say, "I'm not afraid. You shouldn't be afraid. Let's do something, for God's sakes."
Yeah.
So, it's going to be tough to make changes, but yeah. It's all the more reason why we need to do it.
Yeah. I have to say, I was so excited about how well the event went last night.
Yeah, it was great.
That I got absolutely no sleep. If I look like a swollen marshmallow, oh my goodness, Mark.
And I always look like this.
But Mark and I were meeting a Bay News 9 reporter down here this morning to do an interview, and I almost texted you guys last night. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it, guys. And I said, no, Aaron, you got to do this. You got to. So I'm on like 2 hours of sleep.
All right, well, go take a nap.
Yeah.
We're done.
By the way, we are here to promote Downtown Pizza, even though all you see in the background is the Christian Science reading room.
Yeah.
Downtown Pizza, best pizza you can get in Clearwater, in my opinion.
And we didn't get an order in at the start of this, so we're going to have to go get a couple slices now.
Then we'll take a nap.
take a nap.
I'll take a nap.
Yeah. Tell you what, I got 4 hours of sleep, so I'll take a nap too, but separately. You'll go home. I'll go home. So, don't spread rumors. Scientology's already updating their website. No. All right, well, it's been fun.
Yeah, this is good.
And we will see you again before the election. Now, once you are sitting on the council with me,
Yes.
we can't do this anymore.
Well, we can do it as long as we don't talk about city business. But how are we going to do that? What are we going to talk about if we don't talk about city business? Movies? What are we going to do? But, there's one more business I'd really like to promote as soon as we can, much sooner than March. And that's a new pub down the street called the 530 Pub and Grill. And I'm going to try to organize a meet and greet there maybe sometime in December. And when I said Downtown Pizza is one of my top 2 favorite places, it's because 530 Pub and Grill is right up there as well.
All right, so you expect that on our next Dining with the SPs.
Bye, everyone.
Till then, bye.